distraction. And there was no way McClane could know that Hans Gruber was Simon's bro. And that's what made it Die Hard with a vengeance, with Samuel Jackson. And the good cop wouldn't miss this, even though it wasn't Christmas. He didn't get any help from Alan, but only in part 3. We're gonna die hard. We're gonna die hard. We're gonna die hard. We're gonna die as hard as we can. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down to Nakatomi Tower to meet with Holly. He came to get her back and to be her man, but Hans and his buddies fucked up the plan. And that's about when everything went sour at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass. We're gonna die hard. We're gonna die hard. We're gonna die hard. We're gonna die as hard as we can. No one dies harder than John McClane, even when his wife's stuck on a plane, about to crash into the Potomac River on the eve of Christmas. And airport security kicked him out, but John McClane is just too damn proud, and nothing could have made him not deliver, cause that's his business. And with a lot of fights and gunplay, he blew that plane up on the runway. And with a little help from Alan, Holly's plane could land. We're gonna die hard. We're gonna die hard. We're gonna die hard. We're gonna die as hard as we can. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. No one dies harder than John McClane, saving all the passengers on the train. When Simon wasn't clear with his intentions, it was just a distraction. And there was no way McClane could know that Hans Gruber was Simon's bro. And that's what made it Die Hard with a vengeance, with Samuel Jackson. And the good cop wouldn't miss this, even though it wasn't Christmas. He didn't get any help from Alan, but only in part 3. We're gonna die hard. We're gonna die hard. We're gonna die hard. We're gonna die as hard as we can. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down to...
Guys, it's happening. It's Lovecraft Live. Welcome, everyone, to Lovecraft Live, the official instant Twitch companion piece to Shat on TV. Lovecraft Country. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Ashley Schlafly.
Hi, y'all.
And the unassailable King B.
It's a Shoggoth.
And it is a Shoggoth. It is a quick interactive look at how you, the audience, felt about Lovecraft Country episode we just watched, entitled Sundown. This is episode 1. So if you're watching this, I hope you've seen episode 1. If not, get out of here because spoilers abound. We're also going to cover what we plan to cover in Wednesday's Deep Dive podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast to make sure you don't miss an episode. You can do that wherever you get your podcasts or by visiting shadontv.com/subscribe. Also, be sure to join us all week on Twitch for Getting By with the King B on Tuesdays, Squad Goals on Wednesdays, Shappy Hour Cocktail Party on Fridays. And there we'll actually read some of your letters about this week's Lovecraft Country. But before we get started, guys, I just want to say a big shout out to everybody who's joined us so far. So Sorsha, Jacobson, a lot of new faces here, and old as well. John, Shadow Time, oh yes. Ashley, of course, you're right there. Cheesick as well has been playing with us all week. 204. It actually feels a lot better knowing that there are some familiar faces in here to support us through our first Lovecraft Live. Internet Hippo is here saying that it's a very faithful adaptation so far. Punker, of course, Sorsha, and everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. Ash, King B, as we mentioned in our preview podcast, this is going to be one of the few times that people get our actual opinions on the show rather than just us explaining the show, but it's really how you felt about it, how it sat with you. We've been waiting for months now to see Lovecraft Country. Ash, your immediate reaction.
Sure. I just want to give a shout out. I haven't even told Gene and King B this yet, but we've already received our first email for the season responding to this episode. So everybody get on those emails, get on your keys and start sending us your opinions. But as far as my reaction to the show, I'll be very honest. I was a little nervous when it started with that dream sequence. And I do think that reading the book potentially is going to make it a little difficult, I think, throughout the season, because already they're so much different than the book, and not in a bad way, just super different. But after only one episode, I think the character development was super crazy, insane in a good way. I already love all of the characters. I love Ruby. I love Atticus. I love everybody. And I'm eager to get to know the rest of them a bit more. I thought the world building was nice. I don't know, though, if I'm horribly moved so far. I thought this episode moved really quickly. I really thought it could have been 2 episodes rather than 1. I didn't think it all needed to be shoved together. And I do so far think that it's pretty typical of what we've seen so far regarding like the era of storytelling that's kind of being portrayed here. I think we've seen a lot of these stories before, and I've read some reviews, and I'm hoping that we get some more unique narratives about what it was like to live in the Jim Crow era from the Black perspective, because that I think is what made the book really, really special. I'm just gonna throw it out there because it's opinion time. I did think the monsters were kind of lame. Don't get me started on the vampire thing and how artificial light affected them. We're just gonna leave all of that aside. And with that in mind, there is just one line, and I wrote it down here that it's gonna be my mantra for the season. Atticus says, stories are like people. Loving them doesn't make them perfect. You just try and cherish them and overlook their flaws. And I feel like that's our showrunners already kind of talking to us. And I'm gonna cherish this. It's good TV. Something on HBO is fucking back. And I'm gonna enjoy what they're giving me. I'm gonna ignore the flaws. And I'm excited to kind of hear what you guys think.
Well, King B's got, I don't know if it's a grimace, if there's something in his eye, he's laughing. What's going on there, King B?
No, I was just thinking of all the times when movies kind of subtly pushed the hey, don't fucking judge us opinions out there on the table for us. And yeah, that line in the show stuck out. I knew that was going to be sort of hey, if you don't like it, sorry in advance. It reminds me of the X-Men 3 joke when they put out a little thing like, oh, the third one's always the worst one in the franchise. But yeah, Ash, you're right. It's just good to have something on HBO.
Now, speaking of which, Punker said that HBO really knows how to make their first episodes real bangers. And we had also great feedback from Judavar, who says this was a great TV episode. I'm praying the rest is just that good. But Cheezick pointed out that episode went by real fast. And that's how I felt. And it was weird because as a podcaster, the greedy side of me is like, yes. But then as a viewer, I'm like, slow the fuck down. Like I had so many questions, so many things I wanted to see. What's life like in Chicago? What's the relationship between George and Hippolyta? Like, how is the family dynamic? Like what is, who the fuck was Atticus talking to on the phone? So many questions that I want to develop. And also like, these are road trips. Road trips, one of the great things about them is as a writer, you can stretch that shit out for so long. What did you see along the way? Who did you encounter? What conversations were had in the car? Like, I was just like, Ash, I was like, you slow the fuck down. But as a podcaster, we're like, oh shit. Like, for you guys, since it zipped through that episode, we have so much to talk about in the deep dive as far as like, oh, that book you saw for 5 seconds, let's talk about that. Or like, oh, that neighborhood they were in, or like, oh, that illusion there. Even the drawings, like in the Safe Traveler's Guide, like there's so much there for us to dive into. So I was really excited about that. But again, I think King B, you're a viewer. So Ash and I have read the book. You have not read the book, and I was wondering, did you feel like it was moving too fast, or was it just the right pace for you?
I was sitting there watching it, and I was thinking to myself, what the fuck kind of book is this? Because they introduce Atticus through to me, the most I need to know about Atticus is everything from his little dream sequence and the fact that he's reading, Pulp Fiction stories. Like, I already get who this guy is. He is, I mean, he's the man of our adventure. And then they introduce him to his uncle, who, reads a passage from a book, and he's very scholarly, and he's got a book for everything he needs to research. All right, I know who this guy is. And then the sassy lady comes and sings with her sister, and clearly she's, prodigal return, and I know who she's about. And now all of a sudden they're on this adventure together. Like, that's very pulpy. It's really basic. Like, there's not a lot of depth. There's a lot of action. And so I'm wondering, like, this book that you and Ash claimed to think was amazing, like, is this just another pulp story that kind of bites off Lovecraft and Edgar Rice Burroughs and Robert E. Howard and just runs with existing work, like a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen sort of thing? Or is it actually supposed to be like a deep tale about, a racial experience? Because I just don't know what they're doing with the pacing here.
Well,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead, Ash, please.
When I was just going to say, just to that end, I do think that it's going to be interesting because if you remember on the preview pod when we talked about our hopes for this season, one of the things that I talked about and that I think you kind of agree with, Gene, was we were hoping maybe it found a bit more of its voice in terms of whether or not it's a sci-fi, or is it a horror, is it a social justice story? Where does it orient itself? Because the book, that was my biggest critique of it, is that it didn't really find its place in terms of genre. And so I'm hoping that they do this here, and they've done a beautiful job of fixing the main problem people have with the book so far, which is this disparate storytelling where the characters are all kind of told in these kind of staccato ways, where we're looking from Atticus's perspective and now we're looking for Ruby's perspective. They did a really good job of meshing all of that together. So I'm hoping, because they did that so well, that maybe that other problem that you're kind of alluding to here, King B, I'm hoping that gets, that kind of gets fixed over the next couple episodes too.
It just definitely feels like they were trying to give us a ton of information and get us well down the road. It almost feels like at this point it's no longer a road movie, that they've already reached their destination.
Yeah.
And that
sorry, go ahead.
The rest of the episode takes place in this house.
I was kind of surprised because I was looking at the clock and I was like, okay, cool. I know that we got to come on. We got to do Twitch. And I was like, we only got a couple minutes left. And I'm like, wait, they're just now getting to this part. I was like, how are they going to cram so much in there? And they really zip through some parts. But one of the things that would be really helpful, guys, is as we're doing this Twitch. So this is really the replacement for the Instacast we normally do. So what's really great about it, though, is out there on Twitch, if there are things that you feel like you would like to know more about in the deep dive, please go ahead and put them in the chat. That'll give us ideas of the buckets that we want to cover. couple other things before we move into the killer topics that we want to talk about on Wednesday's Deep Dive is formatting. So this week, as I just mentioned, this is basically our Instacast now, Lovecraft Live. It's on Twitch. You can watch it here live, interact with us, and please do type to us. Let us know what you're thinking about. Ways you can support the podcast now is by cheering in Twitch. So if you're a first timer to Twitch and you're not used to this format, there's a little bit icon. It's right next to your chat box. You click that and you can cheer for us. It's a way of showing support for the podcast. Again, the podcast is always free. The Twitch stream is always free, but you can help support us by doing that. Another way you can do it is by subscribing. So if you see all the people with little toilet paper rolls next to their names, those are subscribers who kick a little bit of cash every month over to Shat on Entertainment, to support Shat on TV. And thanks. There you go, Ash. Perfect. So that to support Shat on TV and Shat the Movies. And so subscribing, you can do it with your credit card through Twitch Prime. And it'll take a little bit every month, but you can use, thanks Sarah for the cheer. But you can do, you can go ahead and you get special emotes, like you can do these little Juniper heads, Big D heads, Ashley Schlafly's, Gene Lyons's, and someday, maybe this week actually, we'll have a King B. So that's one way to do it. And if you already have Amazon Prime, awesome. Twitch Prime is actually included in that, so it doesn't cost you anything. So I want to get that out of the way. But guys, please let us know what you want to talk about. So Punker says he wants to know more about the speech that was playing over the montage of them traveling through the bad parts of America. Now, that hit super hard. So Ash was a couple minutes ahead of me. And Ash, you messaged it to us in Slack. I saw it, and then it hit. And I was sobbing. I mean, I wrote in the Discord that I was ugly crying over this moment. Do you want to preview just a little taste of what that was all about?
Yeah, so Punker, you and I are totally on the same wavelength here. So that's James Baldwin's. It's an excerpt. It's actually the beginning piece of The American Dream of the American Negro. It's one of his most famous pieces. And so when that started playing, this is Jordan Peele. I'll say this. I feel like it was very clear this episode what was Peele and what was Abrams, and what their influences were. And this was clearly Jordan Peele here, and it was brilliant. I think that what we're looking at here and what I really want to talk about on the deep dive is there's this concept of the American dream that I think is really important in this story and any other that's set within this era. Lovecraft, I think, this show, I think, is about a type of dream that turns into a nightmare if you have a certain color skin, that the American dream is very different for you, certainly for the characters and what we saw. And then I want to kind of juxtapose that with Lovecraft himself. So Atticus mentions, and Coach Marcus said a few minutes ago that he likes, they called Lovecraft out on his bullshit. And I agree. I mean, Lovecraft was a consummate racist. He was not a good guy. And so there is a poem that Atticus mentions that his father makes him memorize and recite. And I want to talk about that poem juxtaposed with Baldwin's work and kind of talk about maybe these overarching themes that we're going to be seeing here, how sci-fi and racism kind of interact with one another, and how that's going to kind of set the stage for what we're going to view this season.
So King B, so Ash, you mentioned Baldwin and Mark. Mark's 7 in the chat was also saying that you can actually find this entire recording on YouTube. Was there anything else, like what's the big thing that you overarching theme other than that you were really planning on covering for the deep dive that comes out Wednesday?
Me?
Yeah.
That was what I wanted to cover.
Oh, okay. King B, how about you?
Well, one of the things that the first thing I want to talk about is the dream sequence that we saw in the beginning. I think that was, they gave us peeks of that in the trailer, and I thought that was going to come much later in the story and be integral to the plot. But really, I just saw a lot of imagery that spoke to a young guy that reads a lot of pulp fiction and sci-fi. And so I kind of wanted to just talk about a lot of the things that we see in that little dream sequence. One of the things that I really want to talk about, and this is probably the better place, is what we had mentioned before. And does the score, does the pace, does the tone of this show really meet the needs of the heavy subject matter that's being shown to us? We're seeing this Jim Crow era, very racist, white versus black uh, imagery and these plot elements that are going down around the same time and place that there's this strange, supernatural disappearance mystery. And I got to ask, does it really work together? And can sci-fi and horror be a great genre for dealing with, really heavy racist issues? Because I got to tell you, there comes a point where I feel that they can't, and it's not going to work, because you can't have the notion of American citizens being chased and potentially murdered by police on a daily basis and monsters. Like, I'm going to worry about the more tangible thing before I even worry about the monsters at night. And I've got to wonder, is this being presented in this fashion in a way that's really meaningful, or are they just kind of just milking the zeitgeist? One of the things that I'm worried about, that I mentioned, and I'm not going to say it as well here, is that I worry that as a culture we might be looking at stories of racial disharmony and racial inequality with the same sort of fervor that we were looking at serial murders a year ago, or true crime stories that we fixate on Netflix. Are we now suddenly just hungry for these sort of stories of racial divide and looking for those now in material like this? I just don't know. I don't know if it's working. I don't know if I worry that it's going to become disingenuous.
I wanted to send a thank you to Zuger for throwing us a cheer. And Zuger said that her request was probably super basic, but she didn't read the book at all. And so that whole scene in the bookstore with Uncle George, and they really did zip through it. They take a lot more time in the book, but Uncle George and Atticus are discussing the letter, and then there's also lots of book references they throw out there. I mean, we see the Count of Monte Cristo in there. We see the
that anthology.
Yeah, the anthology. Also the John. Fuck, I've got it in my notes here. The John Carter. Sorry, the John Carter.
Yeah, John
book as well.
Carter. Yeah.
And so those things do come up. And Ash, I think you were saying that you're gonna go ahead and snag that for her.
Yeah. I've been making a list as we go of what kind of everybody's been mentioning. And I think that it's not basic at all, Zuger, because I think that the reason it's called Lovecraft Country is because Atticus is so obsessed with sci-fi. And so I think that it's going to be really important to pick up on those little references. I also had Bradbury written down because they make 2 references to him as well throughout this episode. So yeah, I think that we'll definitely be looking into that for you, Zuger.
Now, for me, the thing that struck me as the most entertaining, well, there's 2 things really. Is one was that green book, and specifically the way it's portrayed in Lovecraft Country. So there are little drawings that you see in there. Now, in this case, they were done by Diana, who is George and Hippolyta's kid, or Hippolyta, as the TV show likes to call her. By the way, those scenes, I don't know if we'll get into the deep dive, so I should just say it here. Those scenes with George and Hippolyta, or Hippolyta if you prefer, I really enjoyed, for one simple reason, which is sometimes you see something on screen that should seem very normal to you, but it seems like an outlier because you've never seen it before. And for me, it was a black couple who is roughly my age, and they're being intimate with each other. And I was like, shit, it's not weird, but I was just like, why does this seem so novel to me? And I was like, oh, because you're never allowed to see something like this on TV. So that was super cool. But 2 things that I wanted to cover. One was that book and what those drawings are all about. So when they're talking about trolls, or when they're talking about, like little wizard looking guys, like what is that all about? And then the other issue was talking about Letitia as a character, because Letitia is something very interesting in that I was concerned in doing this show about the fact that it already feels dated, in that the subject matter is already kind of old. Like it's for us, it's from a bygone era already. And Letitia, to me, seems like the character that's meant to span that space, right? It feels to me like she is 2020 time traveling back to to the 1950s, right? And so that was really cool. Like that Letitia fucking Lewis, like I was like, in other scenarios, I would feel like it was forced, but to me, it felt like consistent with her character, and just like she is a do not give a fuck person who is way ahead of her time, which I enjoyed.
Yeah. And can we just talk about how Journey Smollett looked great in this episode?
Oh
She's
my
beautiful.
well, I mean, listen, everyone looked great in this episode. I
They
got
Atticus
did,
ain't
but-
no slouch.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I was just blown away by how beautiful she was in this episode.
It was borderline distracting. Like she showed up at the block party, and I was like, holy shit, she's loaded in the car. I'm like, Jesus Christ. She comes out of the diner. What the fuck? And so, yeah, I mean, listen, this whole show definitely looks like it was shot on which is ironic because it was actually shot in Chicago, shot in Georgia, shot in other parts of Illinois, but the whole thing looks like it was is like green screen. It is. Yeah. It's almost too pretty.
Agreed.
I thought you just inhaling there, King B?
Yeah,
No,
I was
waiting.
even though listen, nobody wants to hear someone just bash on something for half an hour, but I'm getting some American Gods chills. I know it's not going to be that bad, but I'm just thankful to have something nice on TV to watch. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay. So when we're talking about that too, again, as I'm glad that you brought that up, King B, because you did not read the book, so I don't feel like the book is tainting. And by the way, guys, if you're worried about this in the podcast, there will not be the book. This is right now for the Instacast as we're talking about our opinions on it and just kind of our personal takes. So part of it for me was I'm glad that you brought that up, because I was worried that in reading the book, and there's always that cliche of like the book is so much better than the show, whatever, is that I applied my own adulthood to it and my own sensibilities to it. And so for me, everything was much darker. And it felt like the show is so bright. It's so energetic. And then I thought, well, fuck, it's TV, dumb shit. Like, it's supposed to be that way. Nobody wants a book on screen. I mean, Ash and I might, but no sane person wants a book on screen.
Yeah.
I would also say that it's safe to say that even a Lovecraftian style horror story doesn't make for great, exciting television. You can go and catch Color Out of Space. It's a Nicolas Cage movie that's just straight up a Lovecraft story, and it is tedious and almost nonsensical at times. But that's just kind of the nature of those stories.
Now, I am putting up a poll right now for 1 minute, which is, what did you think of the monsters? Were they good? Were they bad? Were they meh? And I don't mean their motivations. How did they look on screen to you? Right. And King B, to clarify to you, let's include King B's, also the effects in general on the monsters, including severed arms, etc.
Yeah. I mean, I have to point out here, I mean, just a couple of minutes ago, I mean, Punker made a good point. He said that, he was glad the monsters were chasing everybody and not just targeting the cops. And I do agree. That would have been way too on the nose if they had just eaten the cops, which is what happens in the book. So I thought that this was definitely an improvement for sure. Seeing them, I mean, it's all kind of suggestion, and it's very M. Night Shyamalan in the book. You don't actually see anything, right? But I'm glad that they didn't just run away from the light.
They're fucking gremlins. They're giant gremlins.
Yeah. And then what was hanging? Did they have udders? What was hanging underneath them?
Oh, they have a second set of little vestigial arms.
Yeah. Come on, Ash, get with it. You don't know about vestigial arms? So we had, the poll is over. 73% of people said meh. 20% people said good, and only 7% said bad. I'm going to put the meh and the bad together, though, and say 80% of people were not impressed with these monsters.
The bad was me. I thought more were going to come on my side.
When he grabs the flashlight from the severed arm, just the way he kind of places his hand on it is very ineffectual to begin with. And then when he pulls it off, and that rubber hand just is like molded like it was molded around a can of Coke. Exactly. That was an embarrassing special effects moment. I can't believe they left that in.
Maybe they wanted to keep it consistent with Atticus's dream at the beginning, and they're like, "Listen, let's keep it very War of the Worlds, very generic sci-fi." Shadow Time 2012 says when they were racing the sunset, there was a definite Dracula vibe. I got that too. Like
Me
all
too.
eyes on the skies, the carriage like racing. So great catch there. But yeah, the SF Punker says, yes, that perfect circle hand is awkward. And then John says the sheriff should have been dead with an eaten shoulder and ribs exposed. Ash?
He was transitioning, John.
Yeah.
He was transitioning
Duh.
into apparently a vampire. So,
Ish.
Yeah, the vampire comparison kind of bored me. In Hellboy books and a lot of the Hellboy related comic books, and it's all very much based on old Lovecraft monsters. Typically, a guy would get eaten and he became a sort of host or a vessel for that creature to grow or reproduce. And so as soon as I saw him like charge in there and he was all chewed up, I knew exactly what was going to happen. The guy was going to get ill. He was going to turn. Now, I don't really consider it the same as a vampire or even a zombie sort of thing. It's just how those beasts kind of reproduced in those types of stories. But typically, it's like a longer, it would take hours or a day in those other forms of fiction. But I guess for the purposes of this story, they needed it to happen pretty quick.
Well, and just so we don't say anything negative on the deep dive, just for me to get it out there, I
Yeah.
thought it was pretty irresponsible for Letitia to drive straight into the house, not knowing where anyone was. I thought that was a bit crazy, because she could have run over literally everyone.
Yeah, thanks for the cheer, Nick. Speaking of crazy and the crazies, I had the same reaction when we were watching the crazies, and the guy like shoots through the fucking window, and I'm like, man, you had a real good read on the room. Yeah, it was the same thing. I was like,
Right.
she just kind of was like, fuck it, I'm going for it. But yeah, it's
They
Letitia.
said
She's
she-
crazy. Was that King B? Sorry.
They said she was fast, not smart.
Yeah. Oh, yes. It's like, well, she was honking the horn.
Yeah.
That's the international sign for clear.
I'm driving through the
75%
house.
of the house. I'm about to drive through it. Yeah.
Never pass. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, guys. So we are going to retire for the night. Thank you guys so much for joining us for Lovecraft Live. These things will be about 20 to 30 minutes each week, but we will be recording the deep dive tomorrow. So if you have other opinions that you think about tonight or tomorrow morning that you'd like us to consider, please write in at hosts@shatontv.com, or you can tweet at us at shatontv on Twitter. Let us know your thoughts. If there's anything that's bothering you, any questions that you have about what you saw on screen. Thank you, Sarah. And we will be happy to get to it. Also, be sure to join us on Tuesday. King B is Getting By with the King B, doing a little bit of a change this week. He is now addicted to Dead by Daylight. So is that what we're doing this week, King B?
Yeah, I think we'll try a little Dead by Daylight. We want to get some fan participation in there. Maybe get some chat listeners in there. I would love to murder each and every one of you.
And then for this week's, we're kind of be comboing that, so I'll be on that as well. So squad goals this week and Shappy Hour on Friday. We do every week. We will not be doing this week. We are taking a vacation, so I will be on the road. Big D, it's his 47th birthday, so he's taking the week off as well. So we will be off for the week, but Sunday. We will be back for another Lovecraft Live. Ash will be hosting along with the King B. I will do my best, but I'm going to be in the I guess woods of Colorado. I don't know Colorado that well. I'll be in Lovecraft country of Colorado, so I may or may not be on. Yeah, but the most important thing is if you have not already subscribed, please subscribe to Lovecraft Country where you normally get your podcast anywhere you do, or go to shatontv.com to listen to it there. John says he loves this format, by the way. Nice to have this interaction. It's good to see you, John. John is a very loyal listener and supporter, so we really appreciate you being here along with Ayas. Yeah. Oh, God.
And thanks, Aaron's son.
Yeah. Yeah, we could do an entire episode, guys, on how amazing Letitia's costuming and makeup was. It was really fantastic. But yeah, Big D is 47. So thanks, guys. Ash, King B, any closing thoughts before we shut down for the night?
No, thanks for joining us, guys. If you haven't had a chance yet to leave us a review on iTunes, that would be really, really fantastic because we are, well, when I looked, we were number 7 in our preview episode was number 7 in terms of TV and film. And we would love to be the place that everyone gets their Lovecraft Country podding. I know that there is an official pod, but that's going to be more like what the Watchmen and the Game of Thrones pods were, which is more about production rather than the actual episodes. So please, please, please leave us a review. We would love that. It's how we say it every episode. It's how we help the podcast grow. And thanks to everyone out there who's already left one. We really, really appreciate it.
Smell you later, chumps.
All right, we'll see you guys. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed Lovecraft Country this week and Lovecraft Live, and look for the deep dive coming out soon. Thanks, guys.
Bye, y'all.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down to Nakatomi Tower to meet with Holly. He came to get her back and to be her man, but Hans and his buddies fucked up the plan, and that's about when everything went sour at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass. We're gonna die, 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 die hard. We're gonna die, 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 die hard. We're gonna die, 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 die hard. We're gonna die, die, die as hard as we can. No one dies harder than John McClane, even when his wife's stuck on a plane, about to crash into the Potomac River on the eve of Christmas. And airport security kicked him out, but John McClane is just too damn proud, and nothing could have made him not deliver, cause that's his business. And with a lot of fights and gunplay, he blew that plane up on the runway. And with a little help from Alan, Holly's plane could land. We're gonna die, 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 die hard. We're gonna die, 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 die hard. We're gonna die, 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 die hard. We're gonna die, 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 die as hard as we can. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. No one dies harder than John McClane, saving all the passengers on the train. When Simon wasn't clear with his intentions, it was just a distraction. And there was no way McClane could know that Hans Gruber was Simon's bro. And that's what made it Die Hard with a vengeance, with Samuel Jackson. And the good cop wouldn't miss this, even though it wasn't Christmas. He didn't get any help from Alan, but only in part 3. We're gonna die, 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 die hard. We're gonna die, 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 die hard. We're gonna die, 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 die hard. We're gonna die, die, die as hard as we can. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down to Nakatomi Tower to meet with